Chapter 72. God in the Camp. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 7 to 14. Thou shalt not abhor an Edomite, for he is thy brother. Thou shalt not abhor an Egyptian, because thou wast a stranger in his land. The children that are begotten of them shall enter into the congregation of the Lord in their third generation. When the host goeth forth against thine enemies, then keep thee from every wicked thing. If there be among you any man that is not clean by reason of uncleanness, that chanceth him by night, then shall he go abroad out of the camp, he shall not come within the camp. But it shall be, when evening cometh on, he shall wash himself with water, and when the sun is down, he shall come into the camp again. Thou shalt have a place also without the camp, whither thou shalt go forth abroad. And thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon, and it shall be, when thou wilt ease thyself abroad, thou shalt dig therewith, and shalt turn back and cover that which cometh from thee. For the Lord thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp, to deliver thee, and to give up thine enemies before thee. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that he see no unclean thing in thee, and turn away from thee. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 7 to 14. These are very practical laws of holiness. In verses 7 and 8 we see clearly the biblical perspective on various alien peoples. Here, two are specifically named, Edomites and Egyptians. First, the Edomites are a people related to the Hebrews and are therefore not to be hated. The Hebrew word translated abhor, tob-ab, means to loathe or detest. Such nationalistic or racial hatred against Edomites and Egyptians is condemned. The Edomite is a related person. The Egyptian is to be treated honestly and kindly, because thou wast a stranger in his land. Verse 7. As the covenant people, they must represent a higher standard. Second, this does not mean that the sins and shortcomings of such aliens are to be overlooked. Their religion and morality makes them culturally a lower people in terms of God's standard. No more than we are allowed to be hateful and bigoted towards them, are we allowed to disregard their serious offences against God and His law. Thus, while we must give them godly respect, we must also recognize that time is required before they are on the same level as the covenant people. Their children of the third generation of faithfulness to the covenant may then enter the congregation, that is, function as covenant members. Isaiah spoke of the Egyptians becoming, in time, members of God's covenant. Isaiah chapter 19, verses 18 to 25, chapter 45, verse 14. In most of history, and certainly now, the attitude towards aliens has been unrealistic. It has gone from hating them for their failings to accepting them uncritically, as though morality requires that we overlook their sins and shortcomings. To hate other nationalities and races is to forget that only God's saving grace makes us any different. To refuse to recognize that differences exist because of a bad heritage of faith and morals is both to blind ourselves and lower ourselves. If we refuse to recognize the moral delinquencies of others, it is because we are unwilling to face up to our own apostasies and failures. To fail to see sin is itself a sin, and a fatal one. The see no evil policy is morally wrong. Verses 9 to 14 are essentially one law whose theme is holiness in the camp. Wartime is usually the occasion of a lessening of morality both on the war fronts and at home. All too often it takes a generation or more for a country to recuperate from the lowered wartime moral behaviour. As against that, This law insists on an intensified moral standard during the war. This requirement begins with the troops. If it applies to them, it applies to all who are at home. As a boy in Detroit, Michigan in the 1920s, I recall a neighborhood boy whose uncle insisted that the best time of his life was in Europe in World War I. He stated that he had more, quote, freedom, end quote, and more fun, meaning that he was free from his family standards. This man also insisted that many veterans agreed with him, but felt that it was impolitic to say so. However true his opinion was, it is a fact that only rarely do men in wartime show a high moral standard. A notable example was Cromwell's army, of whom Macaulay, not favourable to Puritans, all the same wrote. The troops were now to be disbanded. 50,000 men accustomed to the profession of arms were at once thrown in the world. An experience seemed to warrant the belief that this change would produce much misery and crime, that the discharged veterans would be seen begging in every street, or that they would be driven by hunger to pillage. But no such result followed. In a few months, there remained not a trace indicating that the most formidable army in the world had just been absorbed into the mass of the community. The Royalists themselves confessed that, in every department of honest industry, the discarded warriors prospered beyond other men, that none was charged with any theft or robbery, that none was heard to ask an alms, and that, if a baker, a mason, or a wagoner attracted notice by his diligence and sobriety, he was, in all probability, one of Oliver's old soldiers. Cromwell's army moved in faithfulness to God's law and our text. Its chaplains worked to make the men mindful of what verse 14 tells us. The Lord thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp. The origin of the chaplaincy itself is in the requirement that God's covenant people require holiness in the military camp. The law requires, first, a separation from the camp if any man is in any way involved in any wicked thing, verse 9. We see an example of how strictly this was applied in the case of Gideon, in the time of the judges. In the case of Gideon, the separation was from fearful men who were asked to go home. 22,000 did, with 10,000 remaining. Of these 10,000, only 300 were retained because they alone were serious and militarily observant. Judges chapter 7, verses 1 to 8. Failure to take their soldiering seriously had eliminated the rest. Every evil or wicked thing included also failure to take one's duties seriously. Then, second, nocturnal sexual emissions required a separation until evening with bathing. Compare Leviticus chapter 15, verse 16. This law seems strange until we recognize that holiness, in a strong sense, is required of the men. Their military duties involve the risk of their lives. This closeness to death requires strict standards of holiness. If the cause is worth dying for, it certainly requires holy living. Recognizing this fact is basic to knowing the meaning of this law. American chaplains in the War of Independence strongly stressed holiness. Third, strict sanitation is also required. The paddle, referred to in verse 13, was more like a spear or bayonet head designed to make digging possible. Feces were to be covered so that digging before and covering after were mandatory. The cleanliness of the camp was a religious duty as well as a sanitary one. Epidemics among soldiers have been common over the centuries. Troops maintaining the discipline of God's law have been normally free of this problem. In Israel, a safe area outside the camp was designated for such purpose. In verse 14, we have the reasons stated for these laws. Certainly the human benefits are very real and important. Clearly the health of the men is safeguarded. The basic reason, however, is that God is in the camp. He is there to deliver his people and to protect them. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that he see no unclean thing in thee, and turn away from thee. Verse 14. The presence of God with his people is no merely figurative image. It states a very real fact. God is always closer to us than we are to ourselves. We cannot treat this fact casually. We are always totally in his providential care and government. Especially when men go to war to defend God's covenant and people from ungodly nations, we are to recognize his vivid presence. This is an alien concept to modern man who finds it difficult to take seriously God's presence in church or anywhere else. But we are told here that any godly military action requires holiness on the part of the troops. God is in the camp, and it is dangerous to forget this. We can never separate ourselves from God nor shut him out of our lives. Psalm 139 gives us a vivid statement of this. Holiness in every area of life and thought is necessary because God is in every camp and every place.